Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna. Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Body's falling apart. Today we're doing chapter 9, verse 4 through 6, the second verse cluster in chapter 9, but basically it's the first verse cluster in the middle part of chapter 9. That is not the introduction or conclusion. This is where chapter 9, the meat of it, really begins. And I'll be gone for a while, going into surgery Monday morning. And I've got nothing else to do, so we'll probably do one more stream tomorrow as usual, Sunday stream. Tore my ACL doing judo. No more sparring for me. I'm going to keep doing judo till I get a black belt, but no more sparring. No more standing sparring. Sparring on the ground is fine. Just get a little bruises, a few cuts, but there's many injuries from the standing judo when it's not practiced safely, which Korea does not stress. Korean judo does not stress safety the way Japanese does. Japanese style judo does. It's really sad. So hoping to send more money home and buy more Bitcoin, but I'm going to have to save all the money to pay for the surgery for a few months. Including insurance plan, I'm looking at $3,000 for this surgery, which is a good deal overall. Can't complain. Very grateful, actually. But it is what it is. Always got to be grateful for what I have. Now, the devotee, the transcendentalist, is not actually grateful or lamenting. The devotee simply accepts what happens. And yet again, there's been no pain for me in this leg injury I got. I dislocated my left ankle a couple of years ago, no pain. Heard and felt the snap right away. Same this time. As soon as I fell down to the ground, I heard the pop, something in my knee breaking. Though maybe it was just meniscus pop, something like that, but it might be worse. Then I went to the orthopedic doctor, and she took a sample from the knee, aspiration, and if it's water, it's meniscus inflammation, mundane tear. If it's blood, it means it's something worse. So sure enough, it was blood, came right out of my knee. So they said, oh, you better take an MRI. Did that for the first time. Hellish machine. Really useful, but it's the opposite of kirtan, basically. Music, organic and transcendental sound vibration. An MRI machine is the exact opposite of that. It is hellish vibrations. Oh, Lord. But I got an exemption from taking the COVID test. I didn't want to offend them that much, but I was pretty adamant that, no, I'm not going to do that. And they said, oh, they made it work. Very grateful for that as well. Oh, boy. Here we go. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Actually gonna elevate my legs here. It's a little worse for my back, but here we go. No problem. This will be better for the length of this stream. I'm going to try to go fast, but if I go slow, it's okay too. Once again, I got nothing else to do, and just going downstairs is a pain in the butt. So I'm just going to be inside doing japa all day. Tough life. That was irony, being facetious. Okay, let's start with the literal translation of this here second verse cluster in the Bhagavad Gita. Once again, how I've naturally uncovered this cluster system, H.D. Goswami has done the same thing here. 4 to 6 is one paragraph. It goes like this. I pervade all this world with my invisible feature. All beings stand in me. I do not stand in them. And yet, beings do not stand in me. Behold my ruling yoga. I sustain beings and do not stand in them, for myself causes beings to be. As the great wind going everywhere always stands in space, so realize that all beings stand in me. Very excellent words here. There's one footnote here. Verse 5, my ruling yoga. And here, yoga denotes mystic power. We'll find out in a second. Prabhupada translates this as mystic opulence. Power, opulence is about the same thing. And mystical is what is agreed with in both translations. Yeah. Once again, I'm so grateful to have both these translations working with and against each other, bouncing back off each other. They both help each other, I feel like, for the listener and reader, me, you, us, to benefit more from this. Stand is the verb used again and again here, and that's probably the literal word Krishna uses in Sanskrit. Prabhupada does not use that word stand once, I believe, but instead says beings rest in me, things like that. Anyway, we're going to find out right now what Prabhupada says, starting with verse 4. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. So another subtle difference is unmanifested versus invisible. And the word for word, it's avyakta murtina, unmanifested form. So murtina definitely means form, like a murti, a deity. And avyakta. Means un or not. So which one's a closer translation, unmanifested or invisible? Maybe H.D. Goswami is choosing invisible because that could be cognate with the Sanskrit word vyakta. The root of vyakta may be like vig, something like vig, where we get the English word visible. So that could be where that translation is coming from. But in this case, I'm going to sort of side with Prabhupada that the word unmanifested is much more theologically and ontologically appropriate and illuminating for us with what's actually happening. Then again, invisible is more personal. So to have a more personal connection to what Krishna is saying, invisible might be a better word here. It shows that Krishna is personally present everywhere. We just can't see him. And that's what Prabhupada talks about in the purports here. But what Krishna is really saying is deeper than that. It's not just that, and this is why he's all beings are in him, but he is not in all beings, is because it's not just merely that he's invisible, it's that it's his unmanifested form. And his manifested form, his personality, um, Krishna as he is, as himself, as he likes to be voluntarily, and so on. He's in Krishna Loka playing with the gopis, and these sorts of things are what he's actively doing and interested in. And his avatars, such as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, these sorts of, and Prabhupada too, I'm sure, these Leelas are very interesting, very interesting for the Lord. There's so much flavor, so much prema to be playing around with there. And that's the main reason, a lot of beings, a lot of humans, and animals too, while they in one sense are more connected to God than most humans are, but in another, but they're unconsciously connected. So they're also less connected, or they have less chance to yoga, to unite with the Supreme. Most of us humans cannot see God because, pardon my bluntness, but we are simply too boring for God to associate with us. He's not interested in the things we're interested in, And I don't mean, and this is this is why religious people are hard to associate with sometimes, is because they make all the right claims that, I love God, I serve God, I love the church, I serve the church. They're claiming all the right things, but Palena Parichite, you look at their actions, and if you're very clever and astute, you can look more subtly and see their intentions that are not always as they say they are. I'm not saying I'm different in that case, but if I am different, it's just that I'm more honest. That's the main thing. And so, I know, there are times when I genuinely love God and want to serve him, but that's not the majority of the time. It's just not. But at the same time, just if I watch a movie or play a video game and I really enjoy it, even to the point of tears, even in that situation, I still know I don't really love it. I don't idolize it before God. I still have an active memory of the higher taste of God, which are, you could basically call better tears. They're more interesting. It's more bliss from God. And, if when I'm choosing to instead do something easier, it's because I'm not worthy. And I know I'm not ready to take the next step to, be more worthy, where God will just, say, okay, now I can see you more in this light. And now, you're more interesting. Now maybe I'll start to play with you. It's so simple. For the simple, it's so simple. So it seems, according to this verse, literally, Krishna cannot be in all the other beings precisely because it's his unmanifested form which pervades the entire universe. If it was his manifested form everywhere, or his visible form that was everywhere in the universe and in all beings, then we would actually see him, even if we don't want to, because he's manifest. So in the manifested form, you see him. Just like he chose to manifest 5,000 years ago to do the Krishna Leela, Damodar Leela, Kurukshetra Leela, and so on. He chose to manifest. So if you were alive in that town, at that time, you would see Krishna. If you had eyes and you weren't blind, I don't mean figuratively blind, but if you just simply had eyes and ears, you would see Krishna then. But still, there were many people who saw Krishna and said, oh, he's just a man. or, they didn't see Krishna as Krishna, that was still happening. That's still going on, just as it's going on right now for so many people um, who don't believe in the super soul and don't believe in God and so on. That's eternally happening with many, many souls, the vast majority of souls. Um, oh, God. Oh. Just thinking maybe I'll, this Bhagavad Gita or this deluxe edition, I don't want to bring it to the hospital with me, but I may do a stream. I'm going to bring my laptop. So I may actually do a stream from the hospital bed. They want to keep me there for a few days. And I'm going to bring my japa bag, hopefully keep good care of that. That's like the most sacred thing I own, actually. It's the most irreplaceable thing. I have to go back to India to get something of the same potency. Then again, with Krishna store, maybe they can send Tulsi Mala, but everything's going to be in one bag, so I don't think I'll lose it. So Prabhupada talks in the first paragraph how the material senses are not able to conceive or perceive him, but of course, a pure devotee can always see Krishna inside himself and everywhere else too. And it's interesting, there's two different analogies, very simple, physical, mundane analogies used here. And I just noticed avastitaha, situated. That could be where H.D. Goswami gets the word stand. Sthitaha could be cognate with the word stand. I'm the same way as H.D. Goswami. I'm constantly looking for cognates, mostly out of selfish reasons. It really helps to learn a foreign language when you can see more and more connections with your own language. It just helps you remember things better, and it's interesting, and it's a good preaching tool. If people say, oh, well, this ancient Indian thing, oh, I have, no connection to that. Well, actually, you do. If you're speaking English, you have a connection to Sanskrit, whether you like it or not. Most of English actually comes from Sanskrit, I believe. It's just a matter of how far back you want to trace it. So there are many Latin and Greek words that, turned into English, but actually those words are directly from Sanskrit. Atom is an example. Atom, the Greek word for the indivisible unit of matter, that comes from atma, which is the soul, which is the indivisible unit of being. So yes, it originally comes from Sanskrit, but it's also important to note not only is something lost in translation as it loses a language, but there are tattvas that are lost in translation. So the idea of an indivisible unit of being or matter, that is maintained from Vedic Sanskrit all the way to modern English in the word atom. The fact that it is the smallest and most indivisible unit to measure something, that has maintained itself. But the fact that this is talking about the spirit soul, that has been lost centuries ago. And even back to ancient Greece, probably only a percentage of scholars at that time were, when they were using that word atom, they were thinking most prominently about it in a spiritual sense. Definitely not, I can't say definitely, but probably not all of them, and probably, only a percentage of them knew it in the Sanskrit sense. Anyway, so there's two analogies used here. Everything is resting in the energy of the Lord, and the energy is likened to sunshine spread all over the universe. So, and this is a good analogy because all beings on this earth, at least, they require sunshine to live. But it's also strange because to say that beings rest in sunshine, for many of us, that just sounds like, resting on a beach or something. Like resting is a tricky word to get in this context. Although it's much easier to get if you know the example of the Mahavishnu resting in the causal ocean. And if, like me, you've been traveling all over Asia and you've seen so many resting Buddha statues all over the place, this word resting starts to make more sense in its proper context. But this is still a good. Prabhupada still writes it in a very nice way, because the way I, in my blunt, literal, direct Chinese English understanding would say is that, they're going to die without sunshine. That doesn't sound very pleasant. It's not good preaching, talking like that. In the second paragraph, Prabhupada talks about the most immediate thing that caught my attention with this verse is that Krishna pervades in an unmanifested form. But it doesn't just mean impersonal form. It's still Krishna. We just can't perceive him. So once again, this is the thing Prabhupada is stressing all throughout the Gita. He's most likely thinking particularly of his enemies, as he has been trained to fight them, the Mayavadis, the impersonalists, going back to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Swami and probably Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and maybe before that as well, all the way up to Lord Chaitanya. Definitely Lord Chaitanya was waging war, spiritual war, against Mayavadi scholars and sannyasis and so on. This is just a recurring thing Prabhupada does all throughout the Gita in his purports. And it's part of what makes this Bhagavad Gita so special and unique and superior to all the other ancient wisdom and religious texts, is that we're dealing with a personal God here who is very personal. It's not just a personal God, it's very personal God, who likes certain things and doesn't like certain things. Like, it's very, very evident we're dealing with a person here. And not only that, but it's like Prabhupada's driving the point home, like it must be a person, and there's like an impetus to relate to Bhagavad Gita and its author and its speaker and so on as people. Doesn't mean we're equal. You still have to treat your superiors as they are superiors, but people are people also. It must be remembered. God is not just a voice in the ether, or just formless form, or like something like that. No, it's actually nonsense. But it's easy to forget that when you're in high levels of bliss from actually connecting with the impersonal form of God that is connecting and pervading everywhere, every time, all at once, and you're blissed out. It's very easy and natural to think, this is it. I made it. There's nothing more. But that's how souls get lost, because that's not true. And it's a subtle offense to believe that that's all that is and there's nothing more. And likewise with me, if you are, I made my own subtle offense when I met Paramatma, and I thought, oh, that's it. There's nothing more. That's it. This is the greatest God ever, and I'm done. I still kind of think that. I still think that's true practically. Can I see Bhagavan in this lifetime? Even trying to do that is like, even thinking about taking steps towards that as a goal is like even worse than, to me, it feels even worse than the offense of what I was just talking about earlier. But anyway. we'll see how it goes. My main thing now is to just stay regular with japa and this Bhagavad Gita reading. And on top of that, I'm also doing, this Bible course with these Korean Christians, and spot on. They have a genuine understanding and testimony of the Bible that most Christians do not have anywhere in the world. So it's really special. I'm really grateful to be a part of this program. Oh boy, got lost there for a second. Sorry, guys. Um, and so the second analogy Prabhupada talks about is a king in human society. A king has complete authority, and his kingdom may be vast, but at the same time, only a fool would expect him to be personally present everywhere at the same time. Now, Prabhupada admits this is a crude example, but at the same time, this is a very true understanding of how God actually works. He actually is a king, a person, a masculine leader, who has complete authority and dominion, but he's mostly living in his palace, guys, obviously. Come on, it's not that hard to understand. And is he working alone? There's no demigods. There's only, like, I agree. We can agree with other religions that there's only one ultimate God, but to go a step further and say, well, there's no other spiritual higher spirits at all, you're an idiot. There's no demigods, you're an idiot. There's no angels, archangels, you're an idiot. Or like most Christians would think, oh yeah, of course there's angels and archangels, of course, but demigod? Oh no, there's no demigods. Oh, that's dumb. It's like fundamentally foolish and stupid. Angel and demigod is literally the same thing. They're just different words for the same thing that have a different feel to them. And actually, it's not quite the same thing, because an angel is more like a pure devotee with a spirit body. That's whereas a demigod is like, could be a devotee explicitly or could not be, and is more concerned with its primary duties, like the god of fire, the god of water, the god of air. It's, just like myself, I'm, even though I'm a devotee of Krishna, I'm still, throughout the day, I am focused on many other things. I'm focused on my students and my job and maintaining my body. There's like so many other things I'm focused on, but I am also a devotee of God as well. So, yeah, angel in the Christian sense is more like someone who's directly in charge of salvation for lesser beings. In this case, humans. Humans are lesser beings than angels in a spiritual sense. But also they're the same as demigods, because there's humans. What's between a human and God, the one God? It's the same thing. That's angels, demigods, archangels, maha demigods. They're all in the same in-between category. So you can cut that in-between category to a billion different subcategories. Fine, go for it. That's what Hinduism did. That's why there's millions and millions of gods, because they had they just found out how to subcategorize everything. But once again, it's simple for the simple. There's heaven, there's earth, and there's hell. There's God, there's human, and there's subhuman. And between God and human, there's superhuman, which means angels, demigods, and so on. And also demons are interesting. because demons are superhuman in a sense, but in a wicked sense. So it kind of messes up with the geometry of it, where it's like top to bottom. I'd be tempted to put a demon in like below the subhuman. And in a sense, that's true because they create so much destruction that they are worse than merely a very sinful person who just like overdoses on heroin or something, or an animal or an insect who, that sounds so mean because they're innocent, but at the same time it's true because and the plant animal kingdom, they are not, they don't have the free will to taste and play with God the way humans and demigods and angels do. But a demon can. A demon, like Putana, Kamsa, all these great demons, they are intimately associating with God more than an average human does or can, but it's done in a wicked sense. So actually, the way I see it now, most of the time, is that angels, demigods, and demons, top level demons, are all in the same category, that is between the human and God, that lower part of heaven, higher part of earth kind of category, that in between place. I'm sure the Christians say, well, actually, no, the angels are all in heaven. Okay, fine. Just kind of like how the demigods, like Brahma's, well, Brahma's in Brahma Loka, technically not Krishna Loka, but he plays with Krishna sometimes too. And it's like, if these angels are in heaven, then what are they doing helping people on earth? That means they can't only be in heaven. Once again, try to find the common threads here. If you think about it in terms of math and geometry, it's very simple. If you get lost in the poetry of it, angel, demigod, that's how people get lost and stupid. Try to use your left brain a little more. Otherwise, it's not a spiritual science. That's another thing that makes this special. We're dealing with a spiritual science here, not just woo woo, yay, God's great. Verse 5. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, still myself is the very source of creation. Mamatma, myself. It is another really personal part of the Gita. The Sanskrit, what's happening here is Atma is the same word that we use for ourselves, and Krishna is using the same word for his self. But Prabhupada and H.D. Goswami are still doing a great job translated into English with capital letters. Myself, big M, big S, myself. Technically, it's the same word, Atma and Atma, self and self. It's the same category of meaning for this word, but it's not in the same category of potency or importance or value, so it should be capitalized in the same way that when I say I go to school, it's just small s, but when I say I go to Wonderland, which is the name of my school, it's a big W. This is just how English works, and you can find fault with it, but when you just accept that that's how it is, and there is a reason for it, and you work with that logic, and you're translating from ancient Sanskrit, that's how you do it. This is how you do it. Prabhupada and H.D. Goswami are doing a great job here, and I'm not even qualified to say that, right? I'm not a Sanskrit scholar myself, but if you just take the time to break it down piece by piece and keep working at it, you can just see it more and more. Now, another thing is they've done both of these personalities, and Garuda Das Kaviraj as well, have done such a good job that what's I going to say? We don't need to do as much work as they've done. We don't need to. I wouldn't recommend anyone go get a PhD in Sanskrit from Harvard University. There's no need for that for most, unless you're just really into it and you want to devote your life to it. But if not, and if you are a devotee and you want to just learn a lot more about it, like me, you can do that now easily with these. It's much easier now. You don't need to go to Harvard and don't need to do all this special stuff. We've been given everything we need. All you need is time and effort and sincerity and humility, and you can get everything that you could dream of. Okay. In my notes here, I wrote, I love this translation Prabhupada does. It sounds fantastic, and it's so personal and yet so believable. God would actually say this, especially that second sentence, behold my mystic opulence, with exclamation point. You can really kind of hear Krishna speaking through Prabhupada with this like poetic here, which I would describe as transcendental and magnanimous, which is exactly how you would expect the voice of the Supreme Lord to speak. He's the Supreme Lord, so he's transcendental. He's greater than the great. He has to be magnanimous as well. With someone like Prabhupada or Jesus Christ, these are pure devotees who have, who have their leelas that are very close to the Supreme Lord. And they're helping bring so many other humans to their level. So humility is much more pronounced with these personalities than the magnanimity that we see with Krishna when he's lifting up Govardhan Hill on his pinky finger and how he's talking here. It has to be like, I'm the king of everything, like Donald Trumpian kind of magnanimity, if you will. It has to be that way. And likewise, it has to be that the pure devotees are just the most humble. They are magnanimous in their humility, in the extremity, in the severity of their humility. Jesus on the cross and Prabhupada, working with no sleep, with very little sleep doing so many writings and traveling. There's a humility in the actions there. Some people may not be able to easily perceive the humility in his character, but if you look at his behaviors across a long time span, you see it can only be humility in service to something higher that can allow someone to put in so much work like that in that context. It's only humility that allows that to happen, structurally and psychologically speaking. So in the verse, Krishna does not actually say how the creation does not rest in him. It's more obvious to see how everything rests in him because he's God, he's the creator, he's everywhere. But how exactly is it that that human beings have this free will? I don't see the connection there. Yeah, I just need to explain it a bit though. So it's like, so God created everything, and he's controlling, maintaining everything, so everything's resting in him. So your first thought intuitively would be, well, we don't have free will, and we're just controlled constantly. We can't do anything of our own account. But it's closer to the opposite. We have too much free will. Especially as humans in this Kali Yuga, we have too much free will. That's the biggest problem for so many of us, including myself. It's so easy to do sinful activities now. um, so much more easily accessible. Um, and this is one of the best things you can do for yourself, is to limit your free will, to take a vow that you will abstain from things, and to do something, to do any kind of austerity, sacrifice, um, get a martial art practice going. That's not easy. So these sorts of things actually liberate you, because they limit your freedom, but they're limiting your mundane freedom to instead reward you with spiritual freedom. So your mundane freedom is removed and it is replaced with spiritual liberation. That's the trade that's being made most of the time here. So Prabhupada brings the example of Atlas holding the globe on his shoulders. And this is a perfect example of how Krishna is not Krishna, of who Krishna is. Oh man, voice to text errors here. Yeah, it's perfect example. There just needs to be a comma. It's a perfect example of who Krishna is not. Krishna is not like Atlas, just working so hard to hold the whole universe together. It's the opposite. He's so aloof. Just as he can hold Govardhan Hill with just a pinky finger, no sweat, he does the same with the whole universe. And this purport here, about a page long, is more of an extension. Prabhupada here is not so much explaining what this means, he's more just extending it, going along with what Krishna already said and just extending it out further. And Prabhupada seems really wants to drive the point home how inconceivably amazing Krishna is in his opulence and power. And once again, going back to our last stream about what's the point of chapter 9? This is the point, that Krishna is so amazing. The glory there is actually the secret knowledge for devotional excellence and success. Let's go on to verse 6. As the mighty wind blowing everywhere always rests in ethereal space, know that in the same manner all beings rest in me. So this simple verse concludes this cluster perfectly, and this analogy is given, which, if understood, answers the entire mystery brought before. Behold my mystic opulence. How is it? There's kind of a foreshadowing of a mystery in verse 4. And then verse 5, Krishna says, behold, it's amazing. No one can understand this. And in verse 6, he gives the direct answer to how he can do these amazing things, but it's not actually a direct answer. He gives the perfect answer, but it's still hidden in figurative language. But the answer is here, if you're willing to work through it a little bit. And this analogy is better than the king and the kingdom, which was perhaps a bit too crude. But still, crude examples are still, sometimes they're the best place to start for someone who's quite ignorant in a certain subject matter. Like if I'm teaching the Bhagavad Gita to someone who comes from a Muslim background, I will definitely start with the king and the kingdom example before I get into the wind in the space example. That's too abstract. And if you're from Saudi, you're actually from a kingdom. You actually have personal experience with how that works. It's an immediate example that you can understand right away. So in this example, we see surely the wind can do nothing without the space within which it's blowing. There cannot be wind without space. It would just be a vacuum. It would just be space. But once there's space and then there's air, then there can be wind. But So the wind is resting in space, means there is no wind without the space. Yet at the same time, the ethereal space is not controlling the wind at all. It's simply the background or the canvas that is painted on, if you will, by the wind. And in the purport, Prabhupada shares two quotes from the Upanishads. One of them says, quote, "It is out of the fear of the Supreme Lord that the wind is blowing," unquote. That's so beautiful. I think I always felt that as a kid, that the wind had some kind of anger or fear to it. It had some emotional context to it. And I didn't think it was about me. I thought I always had a sense since I was a kid that the wind was being moved by something else and not something material. There was some demigod or something that's feeling something, and then the wind is like an expression of that. I always felt that since I was a kid, and the sound of it too, rustling through trees. I always loved that. Could be because I'm an Aquarius, I'm an air sign, who knows? So this is as I said in the beginning, this is the first verse cluster in the middle part of this chapter, where in every chapter so far, it seems you have just one or at most two verse clusters that introduce the chapter, and to conclude it at most one or two verse clusters. And then every other verse and verse cluster is the substance of the chapter. And Krishna is giving us real examples of his glories. The final part of the purport is almost saying just that we will keep hearing more examples of this later in the chapter. And just as the cosmos is so wonderful, we must also keep in mind it is in complete control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And well, Prabhupada does literally say, this will be further explained in the later verses of this chapter. Yeah, did I say seems when I was literal? Yeah, that was my mistake. Prabhupada explicitly stated that. It's not purports almost, no. Prabhupada explicitly stated, quote, "We can find evidence that this material manifestation, which appears to us to be very wonderful and great, is under the complete control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This will be further explained in the later verses of this chapter," unquote. That's the end of the purport for verse 6. We'll probably see you tomorrow with the next verse cluster, starting with verse 7. Hare Krishna.